This one's for the disruptors, the uncommon, the unconventional, the rebels. You're not here to take things lying down. Well, season 2 is about shaking things up. I'm Beatrice, and this is the Art of Branding podcast. Be ready, be badass. Let's shake some shit up.
So when I see someone else taking a strategic approach in their industry, I go full Enola Holmes or Sherlock Holmes, whatever, same. To learn more about their approach. The person I found, Ryan, or Sully, depending on who you ask. He's the founder of Podcast Principles, taking strategy to the podcasting world that's driven over 200,000 downloads and thousands of leads for his clients. It's a tough space with more podcasts being added by the day. Hex, I get it. But your website has got a badass claim. Stand out where most people blend in. So what's your approach?
Wow. Really appreciate the intro too. That was really cool. That's definitely showcasing. That's how you open a podcast, folks. I'll just say. Also, and you did it live too. But yeah, I'll say, I think that copy is outdated. I mean, I agree with it. So 2020, right? There is what I call the podcast boom, which is now, so 70% fewer podcasts being launched now than were being launched in 2020. Goes for business too. I'm not saying just cultural, also business, right? So why did that happen? Well, it's because people they had the time to do it. They were inside, all of those things, obviously, right? But people thought podcasting was easy. And so the reason why most podcasts do blend into the rest is because they build a tire shop next to a tire shop, right? They build here's the classic, it's like a B2B SaaS company, and they make a show about entrepreneurship. It doesn't make any sense. And then they get on and they ask people like, so when did it start for you? Well, I was 5 and I had a lemonade stand and, yeah. So that's like, so it doesn't, where my thing is like, I'm not telling you like, hey, if you want to be the next, name a name, I'm not going to try to stop you. I could help you. Right. But the reality is like, we're probably not going to be that. So why would we launch a podcast that showcases like a lot of, in some context, a lot of other people, but doesn't actually do anything for you? And as a hobby, I totally get it, but I don't work with hobbyist podcasts. There just needs to be some type of component of growth or business, right? So just to round out that answer a little bit, the reality is a lot of companies, a lot of people, because it's all people at the end of the day, thought podcasting was easy. They thought that if they just get on and interview people, it's going to work. And that's just not how it works. So that's my pushback to the traditional podcast model.
So does that mean that you're almost reverse engineering? So when they come in with this generic idea, I want to be like whatever that name might be, the strategy involves like, okay, let's take it back and really pulling out what it is that they are.
Yeah, it gets personal. But my question always to everybody is, what do you want the podcast to do for you? And think as selfishly as you possibly can. Because if you do not optimize for that, it'll do a lot of other things. Like unless you choose what you want it to do, it won't do really anything that you want it to do unless you design it like that. So if you build a car for a racetrack, it will not be good off-road, right? Because you chose racetrack tires, you lowered the suspension, you put a wing on the back of it, right? Whereas also a lifted truck is not going to be good on the racetrack, right? So it's like podcast for business. They do very well doing one thing, meaning achieving one specific goal. I'm not saying the podcast can do many things as long as you give it one goal. It can do many sub goals within that goal, right? So yeah, that's kind of reverse engineering to an extent. I don't always use that word because it's a little ambiguous because my definition of it versus yours might be different. But in reality, it's just like we help people within businesses design podcasts that work for them, not against them.
So it's almost like the same principles that you would apply to business, right? You go into it thinking, hey, this is the intention that we want. But then, okay, say, for example, if they come to you with, I want my podcast to do X, but then there's, I don't know, 50 other podcasts in the same space as them with that same intention. So how do you differentiate them?
Yeah. So the first thing is making sure the podcast is going to do something that your other content and other things don't already do. Well, I'm going to make my newsletter a text version of the podcast. Okay, great. As long as it comes from the podcast. Now, but the newsletter person might be like, no, don't do that, because you want the newsletter to do something different. Or you say, my podcast is just going to be my newsletter in audio form. Okay, we're kind of like, we're on the right track, right? But let's have it again, back to the goal. Let's have it achieve a goal that other things aren't already achieving, right? Okay, great. Step one. Step two, well, now we want to launch the B2B SaaS marketing podcast. Well, I looked it up on Spotify and there's 45 other ones. But what are those 45 other ones doing, right? I bet 40 of them are interviewing people. And I bet it's probably in at 30 minutes to an hour long. The easy part about podcasting is that you can see what everybody else is doing. The strategy is just out there. It's right there. You just see it, right? You can read the show notes. You can listen to the audio. You can look on the YouTube. It's pretty easy to judge at a glance, right? If you do truly, I've also noticed, I'll just caveat with, not a lot of companies actually want to create a podcast that's different, right? Because to create a podcast that's different, it does require a lot of creative work. It's the art, not the science, right? And if you want to do science, just do account-based podcasting. Interview 10 prospects a month, three or four of them a month will book a call, one or two will buy from you, and now you just added revenue. Poof. That's a 1-minute podcast strategy. But that doesn't take into account what you asked, right? Which is, how do I make it different? Okay, well, now we have to want to make it different. But again, coming back to it, it's not really that hard because you can just see what everybody else is doing. So I would say add an element that's not already there. What we've seen is adding Sports Center to sales. So we have segments, right? So it's like we have a host, then we have lightning rounds, right? And so it's changing. The format is where the differentiation for the most part occurs, other than the branding, which obviously you'll probably have a better handle on than me. But it's really the formatting, the questions. A lot of podcasts are basically doing cookie cutter. They're copying podcasts that aren't even that good.
Well, damn. I mean, it's not that hard to stand out in that case, even though there are so many people coming in.
I would say it's not easy, but yeah, it's also not that hard.
How would you avoid it? If, say, for example, a competitor sees what you're doing and then they come in and try to copy, would you just try to make sure that it's...
You're saying if a competitor sees what I'm doing, like with my clients, or if they see what I'm doing with my podcast?
With your podcast.
With my podcast?
Yeah.
Well, see, they're not me. So here's the thing. Here's where this gets tricky. I have a personality element that you can't copy. And I'm not saying my personality is the best, or, you know, I'm so funny or any of that shit. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I'm just me. Podcast, I'm me on the sales call. I'm me on the street. It's the same me all the time. You can't replicate that. What I did was I matched my strategy to my personality. And that's what all podcasters we work with, that's what we spend a lot of time doing. I would love if my competitors would copy this, because it would make so many better podcasts, in my opinion, right? And that's all I want at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I want a podcast that works for you and your business. What we do is we combine the strategy with the personality, and obviously the goals and all the other details. I would say go for it. Like, they're not doing it. My competitors are not doing it. Some of them are, for sure. I'm not saying that they're not, right? People have been doing this way before I started doing it. But there's a lot of people are kind of like production companies, and that's not us. And so just to get in the weeds of our industry, like, yeah, we're a podcast strategy company, not a podcast production company, though we do production, but that's not our main sell, that's the differentiator for the most part.
That's the thing. I don't see many people focusing on that strategy. They're focusing on, hey, let's edit your video, do the production, do like this side, which I feel like it can only go so far, right? In keeping things different. Like, what do you think?
I've tested this. I mean, I have virtual podcast clips with no captions. I have in-person clips with subtitles and effects and music and phew and switch it. I've done every style, and it all, like, most of it works, right? So, and now there's a way that I make it work, right? So there's strategies behind all this and tactics, I'll say. Not Jason Vanna would, want to throw me out the window if I called them strategies. They're tactics, but there's tactics to make it work. But what I'm saying is I'm totally in agreement with you. It's one thing that it won't do is save you, right? Like your editing's not going to save you. You know what I'm saying? Like there's also just a component of optimization, right? Like most interviews are not designed with the end in mind. So, okay, you're going to get like from the average person, like maybe, 2 or 3 really good clips. But that's why I don't do interviews, because now I have to rely on this other person to say stuff, right? So then I just do my own stuff with a co-host, my business partner, Jack, or I do solo, or I interview clients, right? So those are my 3, not to get too far in the weeds here. But then I always know that it's going to be great content that comes out. But again, because I designed it with the end in mind.
So comparing to normal content, businesses that are focused on normal content, how do you feel that podcasts come in, or using podcasts come in terms of actually shaking things up?
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about here, right? I mean, that's what if you do one, you already stand out. Because businesses have been doing text for like 30 a million years, or however long text has been around, right? So it's not been around that long. And if you scroll through the feed, I'm going to segment myself here by talking about LinkedIn. But if you scroll through the feed, if you scroll through 25 posts, there may be 2 videos. And maybe one of them is from a podcast, maybe. So if you just do one, you'll already stand out. Now, you can also, unless it bores people to death, then obviously you're not going to stand out, right? And that's where the strategy comes in. You need somebody to be like, this is not it. So if you're a business, say a B2B business, right? You probably need to break some beliefs that you already have, which is like, if you don't think that posting a video of you talking is fundamentally different than posting a text post, then I can't really help you. But if you do understand the difference between those two and what the outcome is of each of those, then we can, and you agree that consumer behavior is changing and B2B buying is pretty similar to B2C buying. And okay, well, now we can start to have this conversation. But I think it's kind of a belief system thing, because if you have a marketer who's just creating, and we've talked about this before, just creating a quote from the CEO or something, and then just posting that on Instagram and it gets like 4 likes, and those 4 are employees, well then, yeah, like that's like not, nobody cares about that. Like, let's just be honest, right? And so there's a lot of like hard to swallow pills. And, I'm not saying like it's easy, because it's not easy. I'm lucky. I came into B2B as a podcast producer. So I'm already indoctrinated into this belief system of the and not the or, right? Like the corporatized, or whatever, like the outbound typical, account-based marketing stuff, and then organic as a strategy, So anyway, getting pretty far in the weeds here.
Well, okay, but what happens if a business owner comes to you and say, I'm boring. Like, I don't really have anything special about me. And I've had people like this as well, right? And it's like,
well, do you have a strategy for that, or?
I'll ask you first, and then I'll
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear yours. Yeah, so I'm not the arbiter of truth when it comes to your personality.
Yeah.
I am not the great end all be all of your personality's good, yours sucks, yours is okay. Nope. I'm not here for that. I can't change that, nor will I ever want to change that. Now, do I help be a producer? Yes, I have to. There's things that you do on camera that you don't do off camera and things like that, but that's not what I'm talking about. If somebody comes to me and they're like, yeah, but my personality, first of all, nobody really thinks their personality is boring. Right? Like that most people, even if it is, right? And so I'm just going to get real with you people, because this is the type of podcast that I'm on, right? Because I can say these things.
Oh, yeah.
What I will say to that is, again, I do not decide that. Number 2, we find a strategy that works for you. Andrew Huberman, Lex Friedman, I could go on. There's many podcasters that are very successful who you're not watching for the personality. So the personality is one component. It doesn't make or break. As long as you have the right strategy, you'll be fine.
I agree. And look, I've had people come as well to me and they're saying, I'm boring, or there's nothing much going on, or, I don't agree. I think everybody has some kind of, people have passions.
Yep.
There's something that's going to spark a light in your eyes, and it's a simple, like, it's just breaking down those social norms. Like, I don't feel like this should be spoken about. Like, nobody's really talking about it. So, but why not? Why is the rest of the industry not talking about? Maybe this is your gap. Maybe this is your opening to get in there and start talking about it, because by the time other people notice, you've already got people listening. You've already got people seeing your angle and remembering you for that angle. And it doesn't need to be, okay, I need to get on video because everybody else is on video, or I need to get on podcast because everybody else is on podcast. Lean into what your strengths are. You might write like a freaking, I don't know, a Greek god, but
yeah,
lean into that. Supplement with things that people can relate to, right? Get rid of any of that jargon. Talk like how you're talking to a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the clean, pretty things, it doesn't work anymore. Showing a logo.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Gary V quote. It's don't get fancy till you're fancy, really, right? It's like you'll see people dump thousands, tens of thousands into, a setup or something, an audio and video, setup. And then they'll post a clip and it doesn't get any engagement because they didn't do all the other stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, but the person who comes up and just does like the phone videos, but they do it every single day and they build up the audience, Then when they do add on that beautiful production, then it also gets a lot of engagement. So yeah, it's a lot of like not seeing or not understanding the behind the scenes of like, yeah, it's like the empire. It's just cliches at this point, right? Or at that point, it's just the empire's not built in a day. Overnight success takes 10 years over that, all that stuff. And you can't buy your way into that. You can't.
I know from your background, right? Like you've gone against the grain a lot in terms of launching a podcast in your parents' garage and reaching thousands, and dropping an album and creating like 100 plus songs with no experience. That requires a lot of guts. That requires, a willingness to step out.
Yeah, I mean, I think I borrowed it a little bit from people. I had people in my life that, a friend growing up, he was a YouTuber. We were kids, he was like 12, 13. And, we were young. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. So then I get into YouTube, and then I start a gaming channel. And then I start doing that whole thing. And I'm like, whatever, 13. I get partnered with a company, like, all that. So like that was early on. I always played music. So I also had that side of things in like more formalized, right? Like concert, orchestral stuff. But yeah, it kind of, I honestly attribute it to YouTube. And my friend kind of putting me on YouTube. And then I stopped because I was like, this is like nerdy and nobody's going to think I'm cool. And, I wish I didn't listen to myself back then. But yeah, I mean, no, I never thought about it. That's the good thing. I never had that thing of thinking about what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And now I do. So I have to like fight that a little bit. Not saying like imposter syndrome, like I don't really have that, but I just think, yeah, it's kind of just part of my nature to, like, it's totally nature and nurture. Like it's just a little bit of everything. So there's not like one thing I could say where it's like, it was that person or it was like that moment, or it's just a little bit of my parents and a little bit of my friends, a little bit of circumstance. And then also like, I like taking risks, and I always do what I want to do, and I'll just find a way to do it. I was watching, this is going to seem really like kind of weird and somewhat narcissistic, but I was watching a podcast of myself. This is why I love podcasting though, from 5 years ago. and I was just going through my routine of my like music routine, because like I didn't realize I could make money from music. So that's why I went into, not why I went into podcasting, but like I didn't pursue music as a career because I just never thought about it like that. Nobody had ever opened my eyes to like, you could make money, but no, like I don't even know. I don't even think I wanted to make money. But I used to just every day, I would do it every single day. And so that reminded me of like, damn, dude, you got to get back on that. Like, so I see where I'm at now, but I also envy where I used to be, too. So it all comes back to podcast, though, as a pretty good self-awareness tool, because I still have those YouTube videos I made when I was 12.
So you check back on that to kind of keep yourself accountable, or?
I like to see how I was thinking back then, to compare. I'm not trying to learn from myself, but who knows, Here, like if you don't have a 2-hour conversation of you and your friend from 5 years ago recorded, then you'll never be able to know.
How many of us really have this, though?
Oh, it's weird. Well, yeah, it's not going to be weird in the next generation, but in this generation, yeah. I mean, but having like, we all have videos of ourselves from like Facebook memories, so, or whatever, Snapchat memories. At least my generation.
God, you want us to go back through that cringe period?
Oh, it is. I just laugh. I just think it's funny. But yeah, I don't know, to answer your question at the end of that. I don't know, but I've had it for sure. Something. I know this really, there's no advice here. I'm not really giving any advice. I could try to, but.
To stand out. And the thing is, you have done it well. And with your content, I see, you're trying out different things. And a lot of people are afraid of doing that.
Yeah, but I'm afraid, right? Yeah. Like, well, even I have a group coaching program now that I literally made in 3 weeks. And I try to be candid about everything. And I know on yesterday is going to be the first day I'm going to promote it. Right? Like I barely have a call to action on my stuff. That is anything other than just like watch the podcast or maybe book a call every once in a while. But now it's like, hey, here's the price. Do you want to be in this program that's 2 hours a week for 3 months? Like I hired somebody to help me to launch it. And then I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I'm about to click post. And this is so like in the weeds stuff. Like I totally get that. But and it doesn't sound that crazy, but I'll add some gravity to it, which is like, this is my only job. This is the thing I'm going to be doing for as long as I can possibly do it. Right. And I don't have a job. I have rent, I have bills, girlfriend, all that stuff. And I don't have like, this is what I do full time. So that post could like literally like make or break, the success of something that I do. So yeah, I mean, I totally have it. I have that, but then you just got to click post. Or you just got to release the song. You got to decide that it's done.
Just decide on something and stick with it. And that's the thing, like whatever it might be, if you're not sticking with it, people are getting a different impression. So people have seen your brand. They're already building one sort of association to your brand. The moment you go and change it to something completely different and just overnight, rather than over a period of time.
Yeah.
It stops working. You lose all of that trust that you've built up.
Well, that's what I was scared of too. But my coach said, he's like, there's going to be fatigue. Your audience is fatigue from seeing these new posts, just so you know. And the reality is, though, it's not going to make or break. It's not going to break. It just is. Nobody sees a different post from you and goes, I hate you now. Nobody does that. It's especially on LinkedIn. Everybody tells you they love it, even if they hate it. So nothing is that big of a deal, especially in these like you always get another chance tomorrow, right? Like unless you have a crazy moment, like where you do something really bad and it gets out or whatever, which also, just be a person, you'll be fine. And so I also just I don't put, like tomorrow I get another chance. So all good, So yeah, perspective is, that's really what we're talking about here. And that's something that, I borrow from other people too. I listened to a podcast yesterday and the guy was like, hey, if you're at year 5 in business, you're really going to want to start another business, right? Because you're looking at a massive wall that you don't know how thick it is, right? Because you're really good at getting to year 5 and getting just enough to where it's working and making some money. And then you don't want to push. There's resistance there because you don't want to push because you're going to have an even bigger challenge, right? And so that's what happens to a lot of people, and that's what would happen to me. So
I'm going to push back on that though. You might be posting something different, but at the end of the day, your voice is still the same. The way that you speak, even if you're talking about something new, it's still the same. You're still using the same language, and that's what people link to your brand.
Oh, yeah. It almost doesn't. Well, at that point, I saw, and I'll refer to another podcast where it was what the tech bros get right and wrong.
Go on.
And so, great episode too. Two Bobs, if you want to listen to it, really good podcast. Will relate to this audience too, creative entrepreneurship. And they're like, the thing that the tech bros get right is loyalty. Their audience is so loyal, right? Alex Ramosi's audience, not to use him as an example, but just like, I don't think he's a tech bro. He's a business bro, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So loyal. They'll promote his stuff more than they promote their own business, right? So there's things that, especially once you reach a level of an audience, there's like, you're almost too big to fail a little bit, in an extent. So yeah, you're so right, because it's the way that you approach the thing that's your uniqueness, no matter what you're approaching, right? If we talk about cars, I'm going to have the same mindset, right? I'm just going to be talking about cars instead of podcasts.
Exactly. And it's maintaining that. Like, the same reason why Taylor Swift got as famous as she did. She built that one consistent image and one consistent perception that she didn't break trust on, right? She was always there and as close as possible with the audience, and that's continued on. Anyhow, there is one question that I ask everyone that comes up on the podcast, and that is, what is the one societal norm that you want to push back on and teach others about?
Literally just sticking to what you want to do, right? Like, not what this is going to sound a little counterintuitive. It's not necessarily what you want to do is what you need to do. Meaning, you go through this career path, right? And everything is laid out for you, right? It's like, you're going to do this, go to this college, then this is going to happen. And then that may not be what you want to do, right? What you want to do could be, you want to work with like alpacas, or something, or like you want to be a submarine a pilot, I don't know, captain. It's just, they're like, whatever the wild idea is, like, that's what you need to do. I know it doesn't feel like that, right? It feels like, oh no, these people are going to think I'm crazy and nobody's ever done this in my family before and all this stuff. It's a success issue, right? Because it's like, seeing success and then being successful are two different things, right? Like, our own view on success is subconsciously like not who we're trying to become. It's very weird. Like, we like see a guy with a nice car and like a nice house, and we're like, that's successful. But like, yeah, but do you want to be that? If you really think about it, what that guy's like day-to-day life is like, oh no, you probably don't want to be in investment banking, right? So it's that alignment of what really is it for you, right? And what I optimize for is not anything except my day-to-day existence. And I'll give you an example from yesterday. My girlfriend calls me. It's probably like 9 in the morning, or texts me 9, or no, I don't know. I don't know if she called me or texted me. I don't remember now, but she says to me, hey, my contact fell out in the sink. She's a school teacher. Hey, my contact fell out in the sink. I got to teach all day. Like, can you bring me my contacts and my glasses, like, just in case, I would not be able to do that if I was working a construction job or a mechanic, how I used to be a mechanic. Like, the other jobs that I used to work, I would not be able to go and do that. And honestly, that's what I want to be able to do. So again, what I want to do is be a podcast producer and, help people with their podcast, but then I could say, yeah, but what I need to do is really get a good, financial, good stable job, And so, but I think what you want to do is actually what you need to do, or at least try it. So that's my rant.
Love it. I freaking love it. Especially looking into that ahead of time. Okay, what is someone 10 years down the track, 20 years down the track? What is their life like? Really, behind the scenes.
No, really though. Yeah. And you can never really see it, but you could see it.
Thank you for coming on, mate. You can connect with Ryan through the deets in the podcast show notes. Thanks for listening to the Art of Branding podcast. A great way to support more people to create their own badass brand is dropping a 5-star review. And ready to shift your business from just another to the obvious one? Visit badassraybyb.com to get started. Let's freaking go.
Time for bloopers. Yay!
Podcast tip right here, man. Power the pause. Make them wait for it. What's up? No, this is when how I'm formulating my answer.